Chapter 271. Dahlia caught up with Dustin at the hospital entrance and pulled on his arm. Hey. Stop. You're walking too fast. I almost couldn't catch up. I'm really sorry. I can't handle those relatives of yours. You should get some other doctor to deal with them. Dustin remarked coolly. He was averse to the two difficult women and refused to engage with them. Did I force you to cure Aunt Jane? Why are you being sensitive? She rolled her eyes at him. Well, I thought. What? Did you think I'm an unreasonable woman who'd force you to grovel at them? She scoffed. No, I didn't. He flashed an embarrassed smile at her, feeling rather uneasy at her newfound considerate personality. All right. I know they're in the wrong. Just stay away from them in the future. She dispensed a kind reminder. They're from a wealthy and powerful family in Glenstead. Even Natasha Harmon couldn't protect you if you get into trouble with them. Is that so? They sound quite remarkable, then. He smiled carelessly. They're beyond remarkable. The three powerful families in Glenstead are steeped in history, dating back to a few centuries ago. They are well connected in the military, government, and business field, living up to their reputation. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Well, I had planned to bring you along and suck up to them. I didn't know you got into a fight with them. What can I say, except that you've missed the opportunity to get rich? Oh. No thanks. I don't need that opportunity. He shrugged. HMPH. Seems like you don't appreciate my help at all. She rolled her eyes at him once more, but a little flirtatious this time. Hey. Dustin Rhys. Stop. Dakota emerged out of nowhere, drenched in sweat. My mom coughed up blood just now. I'm telling you to get back there and check on her. To catch up to Dustin, she opted to use the stairs instead of the elevator, which explained her current breathless state. Oh. I recall that someone has vowed not to seek my help even if she has to jump from a building in pain. Why did she take back her word? He mocked. Quit the nonsense. Do what I tell you to. She glared at him. I will write off the slap if you cure her, and I'll grant you a chance to forge a connection with us. In her eyes, the chance to suck up to her family was a rare opportunity for a worthless man like Dustin Rhys. Well, sorry. I don't care for that opportunity. He looked unbothered. Dustin R.N. wise. Think carefully. Not everyone gets a chance like this. You should feel honored that I granted you the chance. Dakota tossed her head. A spoiled princess from a young age, she was accustomed to acting arrogant and getting showered with compliments everywhere she went. No. That is too great of an honor. He turned her down without hesitation. You'd better not think too highly of yourself. I wouldn't have stopped you if you weren't a half-decent doctor. Don't be delusional. She frowned at him. If so, please leave. I shall not see you out, he said with a shrug. You. She choked on anger at Dustin's stubbornness. She would have gotten him torn apart if they were in Glenstead. Dustin Rhys, what will it take for you to help us? Give us an offer if money is what you want. Dakota hissed. Want me to save your mom? I can do that on the condition that both of you apologize to me. I'll also need handwritten apology letters. He suggested with a calm expression. An apology. Dream on. His words fanned her anger. Who do you think you are? You have no right to ask us for an apology. The Nicholsons were aristocratic and different from the lowly peasant class that Dustin Rhys belonged to. There was no way for the aristocratic Dakota to give in to his demand. If you refuse, let's drop this matter. Please get a better doctor for your mom. He did not care at all. You don't have to scare us. With our connections, we can hire any skilled doctor we need. I am offering you a chance to redeem yourself, but if you don't appreciate it, don't blame me for making you pay. Chapter 272. Once my mom is cured, we'll hash out our past and present grievances together. Dakota said in a sharp tone, her eyes ferocious. Knock yourself out. Dustin shrugged nonchalantly. You. Dakota choked out. She was brushing her teeth so hard that the grinding was audible, but she couldn't do anything anyway. While they were both in a stand CFT, a sudden uproar broke out near the hospital entrance. They raised their heads to find a fully armed motorcade bulldozing their way over. The motorcade was from the military, and it was a huge spectacle. All the guards sitting on top were armed and radiating murderous energy. Everywhere they passed, people and cars parted to make way for them. That's strange. What is the military doing? Could they be here to arrest some outlaw? Dahlia looked around in confusion. Dakota also looked perplexed. At that moment, the commander ordered, "Hurry, surround them now." The guards got down from the motorcade and instantly encircled Dustin and the two women. Seeing the muzzle of the guns lined up next to each other gave them chills. Huh. Dahlia was startled, and her face paled. She had been ready to watch the show. Never in a million years did she expect that these guards would be encircling them instead. Don't panic. This has nothing to do with you. They're here for me. Dustin swept his gaze over the guards. He already had a plan in mind. They're here to arrest you. Why? Dahlia asked, flabbergasted. She couldn't understand what kind of crime the man in front of her had committed that could incite the military's arrival. It's just a trivial matter. It's nothing. Dustin smiled mildly. A trivial matter. Dahlia frowned. The military was here for him, and he still called it a trivial matter. Dustin, you committed the heinous crime of murder in broad daylight. We have been ordered to arrest you and bring you to justice. If you resist, you will be killed. The commander said with a cool face. The murderous vibe he was exuding scared the wits out of Dahlia. Commander, is there some kind of misunderstanding? She asked tentatively. Unrelated persons are to make way at once. Otherwise, you will be charged with the same crimes. The commander said mercilessly. Don't worry, I'll be fine. You should go home first. Dustin placed a hand on Dahlia's shoulder and smiled gently. Dahlia said hesitantly. How could this huge spectacle be nothing? But she couldn't help in any way right now. Rhys, I bet you never thought this day would come. At that moment, Dakota suddenly laughed, taking pleasure in his misfortune. You must have committed a huge crime to have sparked the military into coming here. Now, I'll give you another chance. If you cure my mother's illness and then apologize to me, I'll agree to save you. Chapter 273. I don't need it. Dustin said, rejecting Dakota outright. You don't need it. When Dakota heard his answer, she was stunned. She never thought that even at this moment of life and death, Dustin would still dare to reject her. Did he really not want to live anymore? Dustin, don't make decisions based on your emotions. Dahlia tugged on his sleeve, trying to talk some sense into him. I don't care what crime you committed, but your life is important. The Nicholson family has connections in the military. Only she can save you now. She can't save me, and I don't need her saving. Dustin shook his head. Judging from the license plates and flags, this troop was from the Balerno military. The people in Glanstead couldn't do anything. Not to mention, Edwin had to pull strings to send this huge troop after him. He wouldn't let Dustin get away that easily. HMPH. You're already on death's door, yet you're still so stubborn. Dakota jutted her chin out derisively. It seems like you still haven't grasped the severity of the problem. I dare guarantee that without the help of the Nicholsons, you'll be rotting in there for life. Dustin, I'm begging you, all right. Agree to her terms. Dahlia urged, anxiously. An average citizen couldn't fight an officer. The high-ranking officers in the military could easily squash a civilian. With just one word, they could have them buried 6 feet under. Novelban. You don't have to worry about me. I'm just going in to have a cup of tea. I believe I'll be out in no time, so you should just go home. Dustin said with a small smile. The military had come all the way here, so of course, he had to show them some respect. Enough yapping. Take him away. The commander had obviously run out of patience and ordered his men to cuff Dustin and push him into the car. Then, with a troop of guards in tow, they made a grand exit. The entire process had been so simple and straight to the point. No one had been dragging their feet. Dahlia was extremely anxious, but she couldn't do anything to help. With her network, she couldn't even reach the high-ranking officials in the military, much less get them to save someone. As if she thought of something. She turned to Dakota and begged, "Dakota, you have a wide network. Can you help Dustin and break him out? I've already given him a chance, but he wouldn't accept my kind gesture. It's none of my business," Dakota said huffily. "Even if you don't care about Dustin, you have to think about your mother," Dahlia said, changing the subject. Well, Dakota frowned. She didn't care whether Dustin lived or died, but her mother was now suffering from a terminal illness, just like Dustin had said. If he kicked the bucket, then wouldn't her mother be at high risk? "If I save him, are you sure he'll treat my mother?" Dakota asked doubtfully. "I promise that he definitely will," Dahlia said with a serious face. "All right, I'll trust you this time." Dakota nodded. Then, she took out her phone and began to contact some people. A few of the Nicholson family members were working in the military. To her, this small favor was clearly not an issue at all. At that moment, Natasha was lying down on the lounge chair in Peaceful Medical Center, sipping her tea slowly like a dignified owner of a medical center. "Natasha, something happened." Ruth barged into the room in a panic. Chapter 274. "What's the matter?" Natasha said, slightly stunned. "I just received word that Dustin has been arrested by the military." In a no-nonsense manner, Ruth quickly gave a simple explanation of what happened. After Natasha heard the whole story, her face instantly grew solemn. "Using the military to arrest him. It seems like the one behind this comes from a decent background." "Natasha, do you think the Hummers did this?" Ruth asked, frowning slightly. "Yesterday, Dustin went on a killing spree at the Hummers and even crippled Edwin's son. The Hummers definitely won't let this go easily. It definitely has something to do with them. However, just Edwin's network alone is clearly not enough to invoke the power of the military. I'm guessing the Grant family must have played a hand in this," Natasha said thoughtfully. Jade was Joshua's fiancée. Considering their relationship, there was no way the Grant family would sit around and do nothing. As one of the tremendous three, the Grant family had immense power over the Bolano military. Taking care of someone with no backing would be far too easy. Although she already knew that Dustin would be in trouble, she didn't expect it to be so soon. "Natasha, what do we do now?" Ruth asked hesitantly. "Go and find out where Dustin is being locked up. Leave the rest to me." As soon as Natasha finished speaking, she turned around and went out the door. She knew that the battle was starting. This time, she was going to fight the Hummers to the death. Meanwhile, at the Hummer villa, Joshua lay on the bed, his face ashen. His arms were wrapped in thick bandages, and he looked listless. Next to him sat an old man that was only skin and bones. He was completely focused on administering treatment, droplets of sweat beading on his forehead. Edwin and Tina watched silently from the door, not daring to make a noise for fear of disturbing him. The old man in front of him was none other than the miracle doctor, Dr. Rowan Cross. After a long time, Rowan finally stood. Edwin couldn't stop himself from speaking up. "Dr. Cross, how is my son?" "Mr. Hummer, I have reattached your son's arms. It's just that from today onward, he won't be able to lift heavy things anymore." Rowan dabbed the sweat on his forehead. "What about his internal injuries? Can his injured core recover?" Edwin pressed. Whether or not he could restore his cultivation was the most important part. It concerned his son's future. The core is not like the arms. Restoring it would be very difficult. Nevertheless, I can continue to research any ancient methods that could work, Rowan said, not making any promises. "Then please, Dr. Cross, do everything that you can. Once it's done, our family will reward you handsomely. Edwin said gratefully. As long as there was a glimmer of hope left, they couldn't give up so easily. HMPH, it's all that damn Dustin's fault. How could he hurt my brother so badly? I'm going to rip him to shreds. Tina grumbled fiercely. Wait a minute. Rowan paused. Did you just say Dustin hurt your brother? That's right. It was that animal. Tina nodded heavily. When Rowan heard that, his face darkened, and he said coldly, based on my observation, your brother cannot be treated. He'll just be a cripple for the rest of his life. You should hope for the best. Farewell. With that, he left with his medical kit. Both father and daughter looked at each other, unable to understand what had just gone down. What the fuck just happened? He'd been very pleasant earlier, so why did his demeanor change in a blink of an eye? Were all miracle doctors this moody? As Rowan walked out of the Hummer villa, he didn't forget to turn around and spit on the ground, cursing. How dare you ask me to treat your family after you wronged my savior? Eat shit. Chapter 275. At the drill ground of a military base. Dustin had been chained to a pillar by several thick chains made of dark steel, which was extremely malleable yet also durable. The blazing sun shone down on him, and he was surrounded by a troop of armed forces. They scrutinized his every action warily. Dustin didn't seem bothered by it. He merely allowed himself to remain chained, looking poker-faced. His calmness surprised the soldiers. Any ordinary person would have peed their pants long ago. It seemed there was something special about him. So, you're Dustin Rhys. At this moment, a man in a deputy general's uniform walked over with a troop of soldiers behind him. He had a beer belly and a round face. Don't tell me you captured me without even knowing who I am, Dustin said coolly. Cut the crap. Answer the general's question. One of the military officers roared. Fine. Yes. I'm Dustin Rhys. Good. Good. The man nodded. Since we didn't get the wrong guy, let's start by giving him 50 military whips. It'll also act as a deterrent to others like him. The military officers with him subconsciously winced at his words. Military whips weren't the same as normal whips. An ordinary person would faint from 3 to 5 military whips. 10 were enough to make one feel like one had a foot in the grave. If one were fortunate enough to survive 20 whips, they'd probably have to spend the rest of their life in a wheelchair. As for 50 whips, no one had survived it thus far. It looked like he was out for Dustin's life. Hold on, Dustin suddenly said. You're a whip me without asking a single question. General, aren't you? Don't you think it's a little against protocol too? The round-faced man gave him an arrogant look. My words are the only protocol to follow here. I'm the one who calls the shots over your life and death, you peasant. You don't even have the right to say no. I suppose that means you're gonna abuse your power. Dustin narrowed his eyes. So what if I am? I have hundreds of guns aimed at you. Do you think you stand a chance against them? The round-faced man scoffed. Quality over quantity. Having that many guns doesn't actually mean anything. Dustin shook his head. The round-faced man sneered. Putting up a brave front, are we? You'll regret this when you're on the brink of death. Whip him. He waved a hand. Before long, a burly man walked over with a steel whip in hand. Salt water dripped from it. It would make the wounds burn even more. I'll ask you one last time before you do anything else. Who sent you here? Dustin asked. I did. Someone walked out from behind the round-faced man and lowered her hood. It was Jade. I bet you didn't expect to end up in my hands, Rhys. She sneered. You were so obnoxious last night, but so what? You're nothing but my prisoner now. What happened last night was between me and the Hummer family. I'd advise you to stay out of it, Dustin said coolly. Jade snorted. Joshua's my fiancé. I want nothing more than to skin you alive for crippling him. Joshua deserved what he got. You shouldn't do anything to jeopardize yourself. Jade laughed derisively. I don't think you understand your predicament. Your life and death are in my hands. How dare you threaten me? Believe what you may. I just hope you don't regret this. Dustin didn't want to waste his breath. Keep this up. I'd like to see whether you'll still be this arrogant when you're bruised and battered. Jade looked at him like he was already dead to her. All right, that's enough talking. Jade, don't waste your breath on him. Let's just sit and watch the show. The round-faced man waved a hand. Soon, some military officers brought a table and 2 chairs over. The round-faced man gestured for them to be placed in the shade. Then, he and Jade sat down. Well, what are you waiting for? Whip him with all you've got. With that, the burly man got to work and started whipping. Chapter 276. Each of the burly man's whips landed with a loud crack. They could be heard from miles away. Jade laughed derisively at the sound and exclaimed, "He's doing a great job." Dustin had been so obnoxious the night before, crashing the Hummer villa and slaughtering their men. She had to make him pay for it. Jade, you must have been exaggerating when you said this brat was hard to deal with. The round-faced man snorted. Look, he's nothing more than a prisoner with his life in my hands. He's an extremely powerful martial artist, just so you know. There were several people at the Hummer villa last night, but none stood a chance against him. Jade was still shaken from the previous night's events. Ha! No matter how powerful he is, he's only a martial artist. Do you think he'll be able to withstand my troops? The round-faced man looked contemptuous. Over the years, the military's captured plenty of martial artists renowned for their prowess. Still, haven't they ultimately yielded to the military's authority? I suppose you're right. Jade nodded. The martial world was separate from the government, but it wasn't an organized entity. How could it go up against the authorities? As they spoke, the burly man continued to whip Dustin. It cracked loudly, but Dustin didn't bat an eye. Instead, the whip shattered from the force. What the hell? The burly man was dumbfounded. The steel whip had been specially forged and tested against blades and flames to ensure it was basically unbreakable. Why had it shattered after being used to whip someone? Could Dustin possibly be forged from some precious metal? The burly man scrutinized Dustin, but it only added to his confusion. He'd already whipped Dustin at least a dozen times. Any ordinary human would already be mutilated, but Dustin looked perfectly fine. His clothes were in tatters, but there wasn't the slightest sign of an injury. It was as if he hadn't even been whipped. What the fuck? The burly man broke into a cold sweat. He'd done this for years, but this was his first time being in this situation. What's going on? Why has the whipping stopped? The round-faced man finally stopped chit-chatting and noticed something was wrong. "Yes, sir, the whip broke." The burly man gulped. "Get another one, then. Don't stop until you're done with the 50 whips." The round-faced man berated. "Yes, sir." The burly man didn't dare delay. He had someone bring him another steel whip before whipping Dustin again as if his life depended on it. After a while, the second whip shattered, just like the first had. What in the burly man couldn't believe his eyes. Shattering one whip could be described as a coincidence. Shattering two was an ominous sign. He was starting to think there was something about Dustin that made him impossible to whip. "Why have you stopped again? Go on." The round-faced man urged impatiently. "Sir, the whip broke again." The burly man looked like he was in a dilemma. "What? How fucking useless can you be? I'll do it myself." The round-faced man spat. He ordered a soldier to bring him another steel whip before storming over to Dustin. He started whipping him without the slightest hesitance, but he'd only swung the whip a few times when it shattered. At this moment, Dustin, who'd been lying there with his eyes shut, opened his eyes and asked, "Are you done?" "No, Vulban. If you are, can I get something to eat? I'm feeling a little hungry." Chapter 277. What? The round-faced man stared at Dustin, who was cool as a cucumber, in shock. He knew very well how much the steel whip could withstand and how much pain it could cause. Not even the strongest of men could take more than 10 whips in one go, yet Dustin looked perfectly fine after enduring more than that. In fact, he'd made 3 whips shatter. What the hell was going on? Brat, what sort of sorcery do you have going on? He snarled. Look, cut the crap and do what you need to. Dustin yawned. His nonchalance made the round-faced man's blood boils. Fucking hell. I'd like to see you survive this. The round-faced man swiped his subordinate's sword and swung it at Dustin. There were 2 loud clunks as the blade came into contact with Dustin's body twice. He was fine, but the blade became chipped. Is that an adamantine shield? Jade's eyes widened. As a member of the martial world, she immediately realized what was up. The fact that Dustin could make himself impermeable to weapons proved that he'd learned the art of defense. However, it would take a huge toll on one's internal energy. Most martial artists wouldn't be able to keep it up for long. Regular weapons won't do anything to him. We have to bring in a pro. Jade said. HMPH. I'll admit this brat isn't your run-of-the-mill martial artist. It's no wonder you guys had problems dealing with him. It's too bad he's up against me, though. The round-faced man narrowed his eyes. Do you have any way of dealing with him? Jade asked tentatively. We soldiers are only good at taking down enemy forces. Torture devices aren't our forte. It doesn't matter, though. I know someone in the Ministry of Penalties that's an expert in this. Once he's here, this brat will beg for death. The round-faced man bared his teeth in a savage grin. Oh. And who is this expert? Jade's eyes lit up. One of the Ministry of Penalties' 2 most powerful executioners, Bloodbeast. Wait, you know him? Jade gasped. She wasn't a member of the authorities but had still heard of Bloodbeast. Rumor had it that he murdered people without blinking an eye and loved drinking human blood. Throughout his career with the Ministry of Penalties, hundreds, if not thousands, of people had died at his hands. Each and every one of them had died horrible deaths after being subject to inhumane torture. Anyone who found themselves in his hands truly wished for death. That was why most criminals chose to take their lives before landing in Bloodbeast's hands. At least the deaths would be swift and painless. Torturing others is Bloodbeast's favorite pastime, and he's taken a particular liking for tormenting powerful martial artists because of how hard they are to kill. Someone like this brat is right up his alley. The round-faced man's eyes gleamed menacingly. This brat won't stand a chance against Bloodbeast, no matter how impermeable he is. Provided you can get Bloodbeast to agree to this, of course. Jade sneered. She wasn't asking for much. All she wanted was for Dustin to be subject to the most inhumane torture possible. I'll contact him right now. The round-faced man pulled out his phone and started punching in a number. Enjoy your final moments of peace, Rhys. Once Bloodbeast is here, you'll be done for. Jade looked at Dustin contemptuously. He'd talked about karma biting one in the ass, hadn't he? She wanted him to have a taste of his own medicine. Dustin couldn't even be bothered to spare a glance. He shut his eyes, taking the chance to rest them. Jade, it's far too hot, standing in the sun. Let's go sit in the shade. The round-faced man led Jade over to the table after hanging up. After a moment, Dustin suddenly said, Hey, I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat? Hungry, are you? Someone get him some refreshments. The round-faced man smirked. Soon, a soldier placed some food and drinks by Dustin's feet. How am I supposed to eat when I'm bound like this? Can you loosen them? Dustin asked coolly. The round-faced man burst into derisive laughter. Giving you some sustenance is the extent of my generosity. It's not my problem if you can't reach it. Since you're so powerful, why don't you try breaking free of the chains? Chapter 278. Are those chains enough to keep him bound? He's a lot more powerful than he seems. What if he really nobleman breaks free? Jade asked. Don't worry. Our chains are all forged from dark steel and are designed to withstand any force. Not even an elephant would be able to break free, let alone a human. Now that he's bound, he won't be able to get away from them without the key. the round-faced man said confidently. He'd seen his fair share of powerful martial artists. None of them had successfully broken free from the dark steel chains. Well, that's good to know. Jade sighed in relief. However, the words were barely out of her mouth when she heard the sound of the chains breaking. She whipped around to look at Dustin. He'd only stretched, but the chains already lay at his feet in pieces. What the fuck? The round-faced man was so shocked that he dropped his pastry. Jade also looked dumbfounded. What happened to the chains being made of dark steel and able to withstand any force? How could Dustin have snapped them so easily? The round-faced man quickly returned to his senses and commanded, "Hurry up and circle him." At his command, the armed soldiers dashed over and surrounded Dustin. He looked unruffled, though. "Relax. I just want to eat." He plopped onto the floor and started eating the food placed there. The round-faced man gaped at him. What the hell was this brat capable of? How could he be so relaxed when so many guns were aimed at him? When Dustin was done eating, he was chained and bound again. This time, however, double the number of chains were used. He resembled a taco by the time they were done with him. Even so, the round-faced man didn't let his guard down. He had his men keep an eye on Dustin at all times. If Dustin were to make any false moves, he would immediately be shot. After a long time, a military-use jeep entered the military base and stopped at the drill ground. A skinny, middle-aged man got out leisurely. Despite his thin stature, his aura gave one the chills, and his eyes made one's hair stand on end. Jade's mind went blank when she met his eyes. She felt like she'd caught the eye of a savage beast who would pounce on her at any moment. A trace of fear bubbled up from the depths of her heart. "Mr. Bloodbeast." The round-faced man hurried forward with a bright smile when he saw him. "Forgive me for not giving you a proper welcome. It's a pleasure to see you here. Let's cut to the chase, General Jenkins. I've been bored lately, and it's time to spice things up. Where's the tough cookie you mentioned?" Bloodbeast didn't beat around the bush. "Right here. He's the one bound to the pillar." The round-faced man pointed at Dustin. Bloodbeast's gaze traveled in the direction he pointed. He squinted at Dustin and said, "Odd. He seems rather familiar." "Oh. Small world, isn't it? The fact that he's familiar to you means you two were destined to meet. I only hope you'll show him a good time, Mr. Bloodbeast." The round-faced man smiled menacingly. Bloodbeast chuckled. "Why, of course. It's my pleasure, and I'll only be doing what I love. I hope he doesn't disappoint." He pulled out a canvas bag and poured its contents out. There were various delicate-looking instruments of torture. They were shaped oddly. Most people would live out their lives without laying eyes on them. Only members of the Ministry of Penalties would know what these instruments meant. The more delicate they were, the more horrific the results they produced. Chapter 279. Huh. General Jenkins and Jade were stunned as they watched Bloodbeast suddenly drop to his knees. They looked at each other, taken aback. What was he doing? He was perfectly fine just a moment ago, so why was he kneeling on the floor now? Was he saying a prayer before he tortured him? Compared to the others' surprised expressions, the skinny man appeared terrified, his face drenched in cold sweat. As a student of the executioner, he couldn't possibly be oblivious to the true meaning of the Kirin tattoo. In the entire world, the black Kirin tattoo was one of a kind. Not to mention, it had already become a symbol of power. No wonder that person looked familiar. No wonder he dared to call the executioner by his real name. It turned out that this person was the Kirin of the Rhys family, who almost incited chaos that could have devastated an entire nation 10 years ago. Shit. What kind of sins had he committed? He'd actually run into a harbinger of doom of this magnitude. No. While the shitstorm hadn't hit, he had to escape as soon as possible. "Mr. Bloodbeast, what's the matter? Are you hurt somewhere?" Watching the skinny man's knees buckle, General Jenkins immediately rushed over and tried to help him up. "Fuck. It's all your fault." Bloodbeast flew into a rage. He raised his hand and delivered a harsh slap across. General Jenkins' face. General Jenkins staggered backward, nearly losing his balance. Mr. Bloodbeast, why? Why did you hit me? He cupped his stinging face, unable to process what had just happened. Why did I hit you? You should be grateful I didn't slaughter you. What did I ever do to you? If you're so fucking suicidal, you don't have to drag me down with you. The skinny man kicked General Jenkins to the ground. Then, he grabbed his bag and fled. He even dropped his torture tools but didn't dare turn around to pick him up, acting as if he'd run into a ghost. Huh. General Jenkins was once again dazed. Just what had scared Bloodbeast, the infamous ruthless killer, into fleeing for his life? How did things turn out this way? Jade's eyes widened in disbelief. She had initially thought that Bloodbeast could help her get her revenge. In the end, even before he'd used his torture tools, he'd run away for some reason. What was going on? Punk, what the hell did you do? How did you manage to make Bloodbeast spare you? General Jenkins' gaze shifted to Dustin, glaring fiercely. He'd been a distance away earlier, so he couldn't hear their conversation. You have me tied up. What could I have possibly done? Dustin asked. Since Bloodbeast was Albert's student, it was no surprise that he had recognized the Kirin tattoo on his back. HMPH, that had better be the case. General Jenkins glowered. Then, he turned to Jade and whispered, Jade, this bastard seems to know the dark arts. Are you sure he's a nobody? The way Bloodbeast had left was too strange. He couldn't help but feel suspicious. I've already looked into him. He's just a small fry who was once someone's live-in son-in-law. Now, he's nothing but a parasite, leeching off the Harmon family. We don't need to be afraid of him, Jade said with certainty. With the Grant family's influence, looking into Dustin had been a piece of cake. Hence, she was very sure that Dustin didn't come from a powerful background. Well, that's rather strange, General Jenkins said, looking thoughtful. Don't tell me you're scared. Jade frowned. Considering your status, don't tell me you can't take care of that pipsqueak. Don't be ridiculous. As if I'm scared of him. Chapter 280. General Jenkins puffed out his chest and declared arrogantly, I am none other than the Deputy General of the White Tiger Army, under the command of Chief General Spanner. No matter who that bastard may be, I can take him down easily. Just wait and see. As soon as he finished speaking, his phone ringtone began blasting. The first phone call came in. Hello, General Jenkins. This is Hunter Anderson speaking. You've captured someone you shouldn't have. You should let him go immediately. Maybe you can still save yourself. Who the fuck do you think you are? How dare you order me around? Fuck off. General Jenkins replied, promptly ending the call. Seems like someone called to beg for Dustin's life. Jade said sarcastically. She'd long predicted something like it would happen. HMPH, they think they can get him out of my hands. It's not going to be that easy. General Jenkins pursed his lips. With the backing of the Grant family, only a handful of people in the entire southern province could scare him. At that moment, the second phone call came in. General Jenkins, I'm calling on behalf of the Harmon family. One of my associates was captured by your subordinate. I believe there must have been some kind of misunderstanding. I kindly request that you release him, General. That's not going to happen. Dustin's crimes are unforgivable. I've already turned him over to the Ministry of Penalties. No matter who comes to beg for his life, it's useless. However, things didn't end there. After the second call, the third one soon came, followed by the fourth, then the fifth. They just wouldn't stop. Hello. General Jenkins, this is Roderick Brooks. General Jenkins, I'm calling on behalf of the Glenstead Nicholson family. Jenkins, I have a favor to ask. Calls started pouring in one after another. Not only were they increasing in numbers, but they were also becoming more pressing. At first, General Jenkins had been greatly irritated, but by the end, even military officers of the same rank as him were calling him to plead for mercy. Although he wasn't scared, it was still rather troublesome. Eventually, he turned his phone off. He couldn't be bothered any longer. Punk. I didn't think you had such a network. I underestimated you. He slowly raised his head to reveal a cold smile. Unfortunately, your efforts are in vain. I can hold them off all on my own. Oh. Really? Then I'm looking forward to seeing you do that. Dustin smiled lightly. HMPH. And I want to see what kind of tricks you have up your sleeve, General Jenkins said disdainfully. Just as he spoke, an officer suddenly hurried over. General, the Murray family is here. The Murray family. Who is it? General Jenkins raised an eyebrow in surprise. He introduced himself as Adjutant General Damon. He said he wishes to speak with you, the officer replied. Adjutant General Damon. What's he doing here? General Jenkins' face grew solemn. He clearly looked a little apprehensive. Others might not know it, but he knew for a fact that Adjutant General Damon served as Christopher's personal guard. And who was Christopher? He was the second-in-command general of the current generation. He was the backbone of the Murray family. Even though Christopher had been discharged, he still held a great influence within the army. He wasn't exaggerating when he said he would even treat Christopher's dog with the utmost respect. After a few seconds of silence, General Jenkins decided to go outside and welcome Adjutant General Damon. Come. Let's go take a look. When he along with his men went to the entrance of the base, he saw a casually dressed middle-aged man in glasses standing there quietly. The elegant man looked like any average guy, but hidden behind his glasses were eyes as sharp as an eagle's. Why? If it isn't Adjutant General Damon. What brings you here? General Jenkins said, stepping forward with a grin. He was just about to offer some small talk when Adjutant General Damon raised his hand and slapped him to the floor.